Here on the ground, change happens fast. Problems feel frequent and urgent. It's loud and anxiety runs high. From a satellite view, the Earth looks the same as it did thousands of years ago. We've been here before. Let's learn from our past and shoot for a better future.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of A Satellite View. I'm Todd Mickelson, your host, speaking at you from Monday, May 11th, 2026 in the space and time continuum. And I know it feels like the news is a dull headache again, starting on about Friday. But before that, and even some this morning, there's some really signs of big changes happening. And I want to go through that. And there's also misreporting, as usual, right, as we all knew, misreporting by the mainstream media. I had a friend contact me last week about the Indiana elections. You might not know anything about this because it wasn't reported a whole lot, but what was reported was that, does this show that Trump has another chance? Is this a reawakening of Trump's power? Because in Indiana, they had their state primaries. So people running for state House seats and state Senate seats had primaries against each other, Democrats against each other in primaries, and some Republicans against each other in primaries. And Donald Trump had endorsed some Republicans, and those Republicans won their primaries. So everyone thinks Donald Trump is still in charge of the Republican Party. He's still got all the power that he's always had. So when is it ever going to change? Well, here are the numbers that we should be paying attention to, that I didn't hear anyone report this angle. In those primary elections, which I guess would have been Tuesday, right? So, yeah, I think my friend wrote to me on Wednesday. The Democrats had a voter turnout, so ballots being put in to this election. The Democrats had 80,329 ballots. The Republicans had 19,508 ballots. That's why Trump's endorsed candidates won. The Republicans did not show up. The only people who showed up for the Republicans were the craziest of the crazy MAGA Trump still supporters. Still Trump supporters. 19,000 Republicans showed up to the Dems' 80,000. That's 4-1 difference. The Dems showed up in record numbers for a primary, state primary. The Republicans stayed home. So that's what's going on. All right? The Republicans are not going to win anything in the midterms if we have a normal election. The normal election thing is up in the air from a couple different angles. But if the elections go the way that they're supposed to, Republicans know that they are going to have a bloodbath. You hear that in one place like this, or you hear it even sometimes on mainstream media, but then they will say, Trump's endorsed candidates winning in the Indiana primary elections. Does that mean that maybe we're in for a surprise in the midterms? Maybe the Republicans are going to have a comeback. Maybe Trump is having a comeback. Come on. Jesus Christ. Come on, man. What are you doing? So anyway, other things going on. CEOs are starting to weigh in on what's going on now. You think the CEOs are on the Republican side all the time, but here's some writing. Lower earning Americans are increasingly strapped for cash. On recent corporate earnings calls, some CEOs warned that their customers are struggling to deal with the rising gas prices and higher inflation. Why that matters? That's painful on an individual level, and more broadly, it could be a sign of a slowing economy. a warning to investors, and a hit to the various companies that sell stuff to people. Where it stands. They're literally running out of money at the end of the month, Kraft Heinz CEO Steve Cahillane, I don't know if I'm doing that right, said in an interview with Bloomberg last week. We're seeing negative cash flows in the lower income brackets where they're dipping into savings. His comments echoed remarks from McDonald's CEO Christopher Kempczynski. Why with the names, huh? Why can't you just be, Christopher Olsen or something? All right. I should have pre-read, right? Okay. McDonald's CEO talked about rising gas prices disproportionately hitting low-income consumers. The pressure there are going to continue, he said. Further, last week, Whirlpool CEO Mark Bitzer said, there you go. I can do that one. Mark Bitzer. Thank you, Mark, for not having a freaky name. Last week, Whirlpool CEO Mark Bitzer said the appliance industry is seeing an industry decline on par with the financial crisis of 2008, the George W. Bush Depression, the last Republican, right? Now we're going into another, I guess it was a recession officially. People are talking about a recession coming now because of what Trump's doing. But Trump said today, it's really genius what's going on. The Straits of Hormuz being closed really helps us. Things are really better than ever. But now CEOs are starting to point out this disastrous economic problem that Trump is causing. Another thing, let's go from CEO to CIA. I don't know if you heard about this. U.S. intelligence believes Iran could withstand Trump's Hormuz blockade for 3 to 4 months before facing major economic strain. A leaked CIA assessment says Iran still has much of its missile and drone arsenal intact and has restored many underground facilities. The report contrasts with Trump's claims that Iran's military and economy are near collapse. Officials say Tehran is adapting by storing oil offshore, reducing production to protect infrastructure, and potentially using land routes to bypass the blockade. Now, that's not what Trump is saying, right? A confidential intelligence community assessment delivered to the White House also finds that Iran retains a substantial missile and drone arsenal. Iran retains about 75% of its pre-war inventories of mobile launchers and about 70% of its pre-war stockpiles of missiles, a U.S. official said. The official said there is evidence that the regime has been able to recover and reopen almost all of its underground storage facilities, repair some damaged missiles, and even assemble some new missiles that were nearly complete when the war began. Trump painted a rosier picture in Oval Office remarks on Wednesday, saying of Iran, their missiles are mostly decimated. They have probably 18, maybe 19, maybe 18, maybe 17, maybe 16 to 18 to 17%, but not a lot by comparison to what they had. The CIA is reporting things different than what Trump is reporting. Also, now just today, maybe it was yesterday, I heard there were Pentagon briefings given to people in the Senate and the House. And it came out that our arsenal is remarkably low. Everyone was pretty stunned. Senator Mark Kelly, who used to be in the military and was also an astronaut, he came out and said, we have gone really far into these magazines. The arsenal where we keep so Tomahawk missiles, all of that kind of stuff, we don't have very many left. We're the ones who seem decimated in this war, Donald Trump. If anything else happened right now, we don't have enough to protect ourselves. He has made us more unsafe. And now, what's the reaction of the Trump administration? Now they're going to go after Mark Kelly again because they say he talked about confidential, secret information because he was given a secret briefing. No, Mark Kelly is reporting to the American people what the American people deserve to know. Why do you think Pete Hegseth is asking for all this money? Ugh. Now, these are some things that you may not have heard about. And I don't know how... It seems like we're at a point now where we're rooting against Trump. Now, does that mean we root in favor of Iran? I don't think so. But we all know that Trump is lying to us when he says this war is going great. And I don't know, I believe Iran more than I believe Donald Trump. I'm not saying, I mean, I'm rooting against Donald Trump because we never should have started this stupid war. And he was told that by everybody, apparently, except Netanyahu, who, by the way, was in court. On Tuesday and Wednesday, he had to show up in court because he is in trouble for fraud, for doing favors for people, trying to get better media coverage, doing favors for a newspaper, money and trying to make himself look better, corruptly. It's under investigation, and he is in court, and he was in court this week. Did you hear that anywhere? That's what's going on with Netanyahu in reality. Also, what happened this week. You heard about the Brazilian president, Lula da Silva? He had kicked out a U.S. diplomat who wanted to visit Bolsonaro in prison in Brazil. Bolsonaro's in prison for doing what Donald Trump did on January 6th here in the United States. Except in the United States, if you're an oligarch, if you're a rich, pseudo-billionaire, you don't go to prison. In Brazil, you do. And the current leader of Brazil he's like, why is the USA trying to mess with our elections? So he kicked out a U.S. diplomat. I don't know who it was, but a U.S. diplomat went into Brazil asking to meet with Bolsonaro in jail. So Lula da Silva came to the White House. They were supposed to do this, bilateral press conference that Trump likes to do in the Oval Office. They kept the press waiting for hours, and then they kicked the press out of the White House, and apparently they also kicked da Silva out of the White House, or da Silva left in a huff. Big fight, apparently, between him and Donald Trump. I don't know how much you heard about that. I don't know. It's crazy. Everything sounds crazy right now. This sham of a ceasefire thing going on with Russia, where Putin had Trump try and get Zelensky to do a ceasefire for a day or something. So Zelensky then says, okay, let's do a prisoner exchange, and I'll do a ceasefire on Moscow for 2 hours when you do your stupid parade. And of course, then Putin, didn't deliver his end of the bargain. Zelensky did, and Putin didn't, as per usual. That's another stupid. And Donald Trump thinks he's taken all the credit. I got a ceasefire so that I got a ceasefire going on. And I'm up to 10, maybe 11. Some say 12. Don't think of it. 12 wars, maybe 13. Maybe 19. Many say, I don't know. Of course, more... I can't do that voice anymore without scratching up my throat. More video of him falling asleep in his own pressers, where he has to sit down, by the way, all the time now, and makes everyone else stand up behind him. Yeah. A lot of... I'm looking at my notes here, just a lot of crazy things, but I definitely wanted to point out the Indiana state primary, because that's an example of what's going on with elections for years now, where Democrats are just showing up in record numbers and overperforming in all of these elections, these intricate elections that happen at weird times that people used to not show up for because it's hard to keep track of when the election even is. But in Indiana, Dems showed up 80,329. The GOP showed up 19,508. 4 Dems for every 1 Republican showing up to vote in those primaries. We do not need to be nervous if the elections happen the way they're supposed to. So we've run out of time. I want to take a break. I'm also going to come back and we're going to talk about why you shouldn't be nervous about the bullshit going on in Virginia with their Supreme Court striking down the will of the people and how powerful that can be. We're going to talk about that. And then I want to talk about the really profound changes that look like they are about to begin or have started to begin, and the directions that we are going to be going and how people are talking about it and how Democrats should talk about things in general. And of course, the young people are leading us to where we need to go. We'll talk about all those things when we take a short break. You're listening to A Satellite View. We'll be right back. And we're back on A Satellite View. Find our website, satelliteviewpodcast.com. Sign up to be on our email list, and you'll get notified of when the show comes out. Also, go to YouTube and search for Satellite View Podcast, and you'll find our YouTube channel. Subscribe. It's free. And you can go and push the like button on the videos. It helps us get the word out. So I hope you can help us out by doing that. Also, you can find me at Todd Mickelson on Blue Sky, Twitter. We can be found on Facebook at Mickelson Politics, I think. There's a bunch of places you can find. Instagram, it's at Todd Mickelson. Anyway, trying to get more views, more word out, because we all need to stick together. And I want to make sure that you're hearing these things that the mainstream media in the United States is not reporting. For instance, did you know Barack Obama met with Carney in Toronto this week? What did they talk about? I don't know. Did you know that the DNC is actually who decided to not do a recount of the 2024 election, and then also decided to not release their autopsy of what went wrong in 2024? Those things usually happen. Well, a recount should have happened, but the autopsy usually is, the whole reason they do the autopsy is to release it, especially to candidates who are going to be running for office, so that they can see what might have went wrong in the election. Now, I was surprised that this came up again, this thing about the autopsy being released. It came up suddenly at the end of last week, I think on Friday. People are starting to pressure the head of the DNC to release that autopsy. Ken Martin has not released it, and people are putting pressure on him to release it. It's also not going that great for the DNC. I guess they're having trouble raising money. Ken Martin did a great job of getting Minnesota out of a Republican mess years ago and getting the Democratic Party in Minnesota, it's called the DFL, to raise money and win elections. So he was made the head of the DNC. Now he's having trouble, and it's because of the way everything's been going. I don't blame him as much as people are kind of done with the status quo. The DNC were sick of it. When I ran for office, even the local Minnesota Democratic Party didn't really help me, So people are sick of the traditional ways of doing things. Now, another thing I was surprised about was that somebody asked Kamala Harris, do you think that the autopsy should be released. And she said, yes, please. And then they said, now, wouldn't she be the one who would be most reluctant? Wouldn't she be the one who would be glad it wasn't released because it was her campaign that supposedly lost the election? Isn't that audit going to have reports about mistakes her campaign made? Mistakes she made as the candidate for president? She apparently doesn't think so. She wants the world and the United States voters to see that autopsy report. She wants us to know what happened in the 2024 election. She does. Why? You and I know it's because she won that election, and that autopsy probably shows a lot of reasons why Trump stole it and committed treason again. So I found that really interesting. Kamala Harris is also starting to make appearances again. A little bit more. She's coming back. Now, she was asked about running for president in 2028. She was also asked about running for governor of California, and she said, that's not a place for me. That's not where I see myself doing the most good. And running for president, I'm not thinking about that right now either. Right now, I'm going around talking to Americans all over the country, trying to figure out what people want for the future of America. That's Kamala Harris's answer. Now, AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she has an answer for that question as well. She was at a forum with David Axelrod, and Axelrod asked her about running for president and or running for the Senate seat. And she's talking about the fact that a couple days ago, she said that you can't earn $1 billion legally. She's completely correct, but she scared the crap out of the billionaires. So this op-ed that she's referring to in the Washington Post is a reaction to her saying, you cannot earn $1 billion legally. $1 billion can't be earned legally or without totally, sticking it to your employees. So let's go back to her answer. She refers to that, and then she goes on to answer the question about running for president.
It's funny because in this op-ed that Jeff Bezos paid for in the Washington Post, there was this line that you had mentioned earlier about, well, as a potential 2028 contender, XYZ. And in the context of that, it was very clear this was a veiled threat, right? So it was the elite saying, if you want this job, you just stepped out of line. And we want you to know where the real power is. And it's in the modern day barons who own the Post and own the algorithms, and we'll make an example out of you. And what's funny about that is that they assume that my ambition is positional. They assume that my ambition is a title or a seat. And my ambition is way bigger than that. My ambition is to change this country. And presidents come and go, Senate, House seats, elected officials come and go, but single-payer health care is forever. A living wage is forever. Workers' rights are forever. Women's rights, all of that. And so, anyways, a finer point to your question is that when you aren't attached, right? When you haven't been fantasizing about being this or that since the time you were 7 years old, it is tremendously liberating because I get to wake up every day and say, how am I going to meet the moment? And conditions change radically all the time. So I make my response less to an attachment to some positional, title or position, and working backwards from there. But I make decisions by waking up in the morning, looking out the window, and observing the conditions of this country, and saying, what move or what decision can I make today that is going to get us closer to that future, stronger, faster, better than yesterday?
What can I do today to move us forward? That's what I have done in my life. I don't know if you have done it this way in your life. I built a small business around an invention I had. I was unattached to the industry the invention was made for. I didn't really care about it, but I could see that it could possibly be something to build a business around. We were broke and we just had a baby, and I needed to get my act together. And so I came up with this invention. And if somebody said, so Todd, you're a successful small business owner, that was 20 years ago. And now we're at a position that business was very successful, and we just sold it, actually. But it was a 20-year-long run for me. Now the new people seem to really be doing well with it, and that's great. I wasn't attached to the industry or the thing itself. I just saw it as a thing that could support a business and therefore support me and my family. And if somebody said, so how did you run a successful business? You're a successful business owner. You know how to run a successful business. I would say, I don't feel like I do. The way I made it successful was when I was scared, when I was going through the first days of this and we were going into debt, trying to get the business up and running. When I fell asleep at night, I would just tell myself, okay, while I'm sleeping tonight, brain or whatever it is that works when you're still sleeping, whatever the force is, please help me come up with something that makes me move this one step forward tomorrow. Make me do something tomorrow that helps this business be successful. And I said that to myself every night. That's my book on being a successful business owner. Also, when you're detached from it, the hardest part about inventing things is to let go of it when you realize it's not a good idea. I've seen so many people have what they thought was a good idea. They work on it. It's starting to show that it's not a good idea for some reason or another, but they keep working on it, and then they go in debt and run themselves ragged. You have to keep that detachment, and that's what she's talking about here. She's not attached to being president. She's not attached to being a congressperson. She's just right now seeing that the Congress is a place where she can try and help change the world. The goal is to change the world. The goal is not to be sitting in a seat somewhere. All right? Now, here's another young politician who's currently in the state legislature in Texas and is running for the Senate seat in Texas, and right now is ahead of both. The Republicans have two candidates that are running against each other in a primary, and this guy is polling 3 and 4 points ahead of each of those Republicans right now in Texas. And here is how he talks. He was talking at a commencement speech. I want to show this to you because this is on the Kyle Kulinski show. He's got a show called Secular Talk on YouTube. And this is where he has a revolutionary moment listening to James Talrico, the candidate, speaking and saying these things that are very similar, by the way, to things that we've been alluding to, you and I, in these conversations that we have on this show here. It's a one-sided, I'm talking at you, but you're listening. Thanks for listening to me gab on. But anyway, I just thought this was so interesting because not only is what James Talrico saying kind of a revelation that I hadn't really thought of before. He says a couple things that are like, that is a new place to go. That is how we talk. But this is also seeing somebody who usually reports like, oh man, we're cooked. We're doomed. This country is going to go into a depression. We're so doomed. Our democracy is over. And listen to, and if you're watching on video, watch Kyle Kulinski's reaction to what James Tallarico is saying here. I just think it's really interesting.
Fuck, bro. Like, this is substantive here. Like, he's actually spitting here. He's actually telling the truth and explaining how it is 99% versus 1%. Right? Absolutely. This is Epstein class versus the rest of us. That's what we're witnessing right now. And he's putting it in stark, easy to digest and understandable terms.
Helicopters from his mega yacht. Young people pay more than their fair share of income taxes, but someone like Elon Musk can get away without paying a penny.
Oh.
All of this has left your generation disillusioned. Disillusionment has a bad reputation, but being disillusioned means being freed from illusions, to see reality, to know the truth. As painful as it may be, your disillusionment is a superpower. You can see the world as it is and dream of the way it ought to be.
That's a good-ass point, man. That's a good-ass point. How can you make shit better if you don't acknowledge how horrible it is? Republicans are actively trying to make everything worse on a daily basis. And unfortunately, too many Democrats are comfortable with like tweaks around the edges and sort of like, you know, minor upgrades. When we need a motherfucking page one rewrite in this bitch, okay? We got to start from scratch is where we're at, because that's how broken this system is. Any system that could produce Donald Trump, the oligarchy, the kleptocracy, the failing empire that can produce a genuine cancer like Donald Trump, that shit needs to be fucking reworked from the nuts and bolts and the studs, bro.
The nuts and bolts and the studs. You've heard me say, if you want to rebuild a great house for yourself and you buy a crappy house, the best thing to do is to tear that crappy house all the way down and rebuild a brand new one. As much as you might feel like, oh no, we can build onto this house. We can improve this crappy house. No. Be detached from the crappy house. Tear it down. Like Kyle Kulinski just had this revelation listening to James Tallarico, and I love that disillusionment has a bad rap. Actually, disillusionment means that you're no longer under an illusion. You're no longer living under an illusion. Your eyes are open. You got to know what you need to fix. Don't keep your eyes closed. Don't stay asleep. That's why the Republicans use this term woke. They hate people being woke because when we're woke, we see the problems. They don't want us to see the problems. They have been hiding the problems from us and fooling us and ripping us off for decades, well, actually centuries, if not multiple millennia. Not Republicans, but, you know, that, whatever you want to call it. The darkness, I don't know. Now we see Kyle Kulinski here for the first time, because I watch him a lot. He's pretty entertaining, as you can tell. And he's got very spicy language. Sometimes he's really funny. But he is kind of doomsday. But now he's saying the Republicans are trying to ruin everything. And that's what we've been saying here too. Trump is the instrument where we learn how broken our system is and that it needs to be erased and started all over again. Something that Kamala Harris has said. I'm just really seeing this whole thing now start to turn around. And more people, if you want to use the term woke accurately, are becoming woke. They're no longer sleeping. They're no longer living under an illusion. They have been disillusioned. When you become disillusioned, it can really fire you up. By the way, Scott McFarland points out that the redistricting wars is backfiring, diluting GOP districts in Virginia and Texas. The Republicans are scared in Texas because they have gerrymandered it, and they're like, hey, man, we just diluted my district. You know, so the Republicans in a lot of red districts have a better chance of losing. And now we're seeing Democrats overperform in every election for years now. And what's going to happen? Virginia's already saying we're going to win at least 2 of the 4 seats that we turned when we redrew the lines that now their Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court, says you cannot do. And everybody was all devastated. I think Kyle Kulinski was devastated. Like, we're cooked, man. We're cooked, dude. We're cooked, bro. And Scott McFarlane, who also you can find him, he's got his own YouTube thing now, and he's under part of the Midas Touch Network. He's saying, this fires people up. It doesn't stop a wave. It fuels one. It fuels a wave. He said, these people's voice has been taken away. In Virginia, people showed up in millions to vote in favor of doing this redistricting to gain more Democratic seats. And then the Republican-leaning state Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that, saying, no, I'm taking away your vote. That's pissing people off. Scott McFarlane, who used to work for CBS, he broke away because they wouldn't let him report the truth. Now he's able to tell the truth on his own channel. And he's saying, this is not going to go the way the Republicans think. They've also been doing this in a very racist manner. So it's going to turn out more Democrats. It just is. It's kicking the buzzing beehive of Democrats even more and more. They keep kicking it for some reason. We're getting stronger. And a lot of it is because of your participation in all the things that you have been doing, sticking with it, keeping our eye on the prize here, keeping our eye on the ball. We're not going to let this Republican BS scare us, depress us, or discourage us from standing up for ourselves. The power of the people is palpable, so let's keep it up. And you and I will stick through this together. And we will come out the other side, and I think we're all going to be surprised at how amazing it is going to be. We're disillusioned. We're no longer living under an illusion. Our eyes are open. We see what we need to do. Let's keep doing it together. I thank you so much for sticking with me here and sticking to the end of another long show. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I will stick with you and speak at you next week.
You've been listening to A Satellite View with Todd Mickelson. Go to toddmickelson.com for links and more information.